Our story begins on Mandalore as Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi is preparing to head back to the Jedi Temple for the first time in around a year. For the last year, he's been protecting Duchess Satine on Mandalore, and it has been the best year of his life. Every day for this year, Obi-Wan has remained at Satine Kryze's side, navigating the chaos of civil war, political betrayal, and the threat of bounty hunters sent to silence her. Their bond had grown in between battles, in the hushed nights spent hidden in old Mandalorian ruins, or deep within the tunnels beneath the capital. There was a rhythm to the way they protected each other, her fierce idealism, his calm precision, and though neither dared speak the full truth aloud, it was obvious that they both loved each other. Even Qui-Gon had seen it, but he did not say anything. He let them grow together. And now, as the Republic recalled Obi-Wan to Coruscant and his duty to the Jedi Order, the silence between them stretched longer than ever, neither one acknowledging what goodbye could truly mean. They both performed their roles until the very end, coordinating final security plans, meeting with what remained of loyal guards, and never once speaking up about how they truly felt. They couldn't. The Jedi Order was relying on Obi-Wan to do his duty, and the people of Mandalore needed Satine to stay focused. But on the final night, something in the air had shifted. Satine would tell Obi-Wan that Mandalore would never feel like home again without him. She confessed how his presence had been the only thing that steadied her heart during the worst of this war, and Obi-Wan, in turn, admitted that leaving her now felt like betrayal. He spoke of the sleepless nights, of the conflict in his soul between Jedi code and the undeniable truth of what he felt for her. The words would spill out like water after so much restraint, and Obi-Wan told her that he'd always imagined another path, a different life, but that he never thought he would be brave enough to reach for it. And Satine told Obi-Wan that she had already chosen him long ago, even when she forced herself to push him away. The tension between them would break, and it was Obi-Wan who took her hands first. He insisted that they make a vow to each other, a vow of love, partnership, and truth that was being kept hidden and sacred. Satine thought it would be impossible. He was a Jedi. She was trying to lead Mandalore into peace, but she needed to do this. Obi-Wan would propose that they get married, and their bond will forever be shared. Even if there are months that go by where they cannot see each other, they will still know that they are connected. And so Satine told Obi-Wan that she will marry him. There would be no witnesses, no ceremonies, no grand gesture. It was only an oath quietly spoken amongst the two of them, sealed by their hands together, and the knowledge that what they shared now existed beyond Mandalore, beyond the Jedi, and beyond everything else. By morning, the galaxy had resumed its motion for both of them. Obi-Wan would leave to meet his master at the landing port. Satine would remain behind to rebuild what she could, and both of them felt extremely happy about where their lives could go from here. In the years that followed their secret marriage, Obi-Wan and Satine would live separate lives in two very different worlds. Obi-Wan, who was still at the Jedi Temple as though nothing had changed, would train, meditate, and go on missions with Qui-Gon, but he was no longer the same person. There were moments when his mind would wander during council briefings or training exercises, and it always would lead back to her, not with regret, but with how much he missed being with her. And at night, he'd retreat to the far end of the temple's meditation gardens, where the comm signals were strongest, and they would just talk. Satine would tell Obi-Wan about the politics of Mandalore, compromises she was making to preserve peace, the loneliness that his voice seemed to ease. Their conversations were short, cautious, and often interrupted, but they were everything to the two of them. They saw each other very rarely, once a month, maybe twice, under the pretense of a Jedi meditation mission that required an extra day away. When Mandalore requested Jedi aid, Obi-Wan would maneuver his postings quietly, trying to make sure that his presence there wouldn't raise any weird alarms. And in those brief reunions, they never allowed themselves too much time. A shared glance in the council hall, a brief walk after the sun went down, away from guards and other eyes. And then, one day, on a mission to Naboo, everything for Obi-Wan would change. His master, Qui-Gon Jinn, would be killed by the Sith Lord, and in his dying breath, Qui-Gon would ask Obi-Wan to train the boy, but Qui-Gon would also get a few more words out, telling Obi-Wan not to fear love. Qui-Gon secretly knew of Satine, because of course he did, and as he died, he told Obi-Wan to allow Anakin to feel the same love that he gives to Satine. And so, Obi-Wan was handed the responsibility of training a child who may one day destroy or save the galaxy. And at Qui-Gon's funeral, Satine and a few of her guards would attend it, as Qui-Gon was with Obi-Wan during that year of her protection on Mandalore. She knew Qui-Gon well, and of course she wanted to be there for Obi-Wan. After the funeral, all of the attendees would go to a celebratory banquet in honor of Qui-Gon's life, and in the Naboo halls, Obi-Wan would stand at the edge of a room, glancing around. Around him, he heard murmurs rising from quiet conversations. He saw Mace Windu and Ki-Adi Mundi speaking in lower tones near the center table. Their expressions were a mixture of sadness in happy remembrance. Queen Amidala would share pleasantries with Chancellor Palpatine and his aides, and Anakin wandered the edge of the halls with Padme's handmaidens as they showed him some of their greatest artworks around here. Obi-Wan would watch him for a long time, arms crossed, the ache in his chest deeper than ever, as he couldn't quite comprehend what he would be doing for the rest of his time as a Jedi. Could he really train this boy? His thoughts spiraled around the terrifying weight of the promise he'd made to Qui-Gon. When Satine finally slipped beside him, she brought with her a piece Obi-Wan hadn't known he needed until he felt it settle in his chest. Her gown was simple but elegant, blue and silver, matching her eyes as they scanned the room. The two of them didn't speak at first. Instead, they just stood shoulder to shoulder until they both just realized their conversation would just look like two old friends catching up. And Obi-Wan told Satine about his doubts, that he wasn't ready, that taking Anakin as his Padawan was a choice made from grief, from loyalty, and from fear of letting Qui-Gon down. He admitted that the council only allowed it because they were honoring his master, not because they believed in the boy's potential like Qui-Gon had. And most of all, he confessed that he was afraid of failing Anakin. He wasn't sure how to train a Padawan, especially one with such unique circumstances. Obi-Wan said he was likely going to be extremely rigid, to stick to the code, and to try and fit Anakin into the mold of the Jedi. Satine turned towards him, her expression soft but still strong, and then she told Obi-Wan that perhaps Anakin had come into this life not as a burden but as a blessing. She reminded him that love was not a weakness. That's what she has shown him. That's what he has shown her. That what Obi-Wan now allowed himself to feel was not a betrayal of the Jedi way, but a rediscovery of what made the Jedi noble to begin with. She said that perhaps Anakin could find strength in a master who knew what it meant to feel his own emotions so deeply. She said that maybe, if Obi-Wan could embrace that part of himself, he could actually be the perfect master for Anakin, as from her point of view from all of this, Anakin has already lived a life away from the Jedi. He's already learned to love, and only Obi-Wan can truly nurture that. Satine could see the quiet strength in Obi-Wan that went far beyond his abilities with a lightsaber or with feeling the Force around them. Obi-Wan looked back over to Anakin as he now sat beside R2-D2, absently fidgeting with a piece of fruit. Jedi Masters continued their discussions on different tables, but in that moment, Obi-Wan turned fully to Satine. He reached for her hand beneath the folds of their robes, hidden from sight, and they held it in silence. And for the first time since Qui-Gon's death, he felt real excitement about what the future could bring. 5 years later, two blue lightsabers ignited with a sharp hiss, their glow cutting through the thick haze of the underwater facility on Glianselm. The pressure of the water bore down on the reinforced tunnel systems as bursts of blaster fire lit up the corridors in blasts of red. Anakin Skywalker, now 15 years old and already stronger than many Jedi Knights, launched himself off the wall in a spiral, slicing through a pair of aqua droids with precise fluid movements. He called out to his master, telling him to let the other droids flank behind them, and Obi-Wan was already there, sweeping his blue blade through a trio of sentry units with a perfect swing. And even in the chaos, his lips curled into a faint smile as he watched Anakin continue to run. He yelled out to his Padawan that next time he will take the back and he will handle the showboating before he deflected a plasma bolt back into the heart of a droid. The two of them moved so well together, and they didn't even need to speak to coordinate anymore. One's movements fed into the other's after these years of partnership and growing together. They continued running through the chamber, and Anakin swung at another group of droids, while Obi-Wan followed with a leap, catching his Padawan's shoulder mid-air as they soared through the air. Finally, in the central command chamber, seated in a containment field that had long been shut down, was Grandmaster Yoda, legs crossed, eyes closed, humming to himself as though meditating beside a lake, not in the center of a hostage situation. When Obi-Wan and Anakin arrived, Yoda opened one eye, giving a low, amused chuckle as he told them he could have escaped, but he was curious to see how well the two of them worked well together. A group of bounty hunters had captured Yoda to try and get a ransom from the Jedi, but they were quite easily dealt with. Anakin laughed as Obi-Wan just sighed, and together the three of them made their way back through the shattered halls. Once they reached the ship and jumped to hyperspace, Obi-Wan found a moment to reflect. The last 5 years had passed faster than he'd imagined. Anakin had clung to him quickly after Naboo, and he realized that Satine's words at Qui-Gon's funeral had set him on the right path. He trained Anakin not by suppressing emotions, but by guiding them, and in doing so, a bond had formed between the two of them that no Jedi code could have predicted. It was more than Master and Padawan, they were brothers. And in the shadows of that brotherhood, there was a family built in secret. Shortly after Anakin became Obi-Wan's Padawan, Obi-Wan had taken a personal mission to Tatooine, using diplomatic pressure and a quiet transfer of Republic credits to free Shmi from slavery. They brought her to Mandalore, under Satine's protection, where she began running a kitchen for the less fortunate in Sundari's lower district. Obi-Wan and Anakin would visit her in secret every few months under false missions or manipulated assignments. There was no harm to it. They were just, couldn't tell the Jedi. And here, the boy would drop his Jedi mask and just be Anakin with his mother. Satine, of course, welcomed them both, and these visits allowed Obi-Wan to see his wife. Those visits were still everything to them. The marriage between Obi-Wan and Satine remained hidden, yet it was never cold. The separation did weigh on both of them. There were nights when the silence between transmissions was unbearable, and times would come when both of them wondered if this was all worth it. But when they were just together, letting the galaxy fall away, all of their doubts would fade. And Anakin, though he never asked, seemed to understand that Obi-Wan had a place to return to, just as he had his mother. It made both of them stronger and closer to each other. Today they would return to the temple, but later that month, the two of them would return to Mandalore. But this time, something was different. As Obi-Wan arrived, Satine reached for his hand, pressed it to her stomach, and whispered the words that he both feared and loved. Satine told Obi-Wan that she was pregnant with their child. This was perhaps the happiest moment of their life together, and Obi-Wan knew it was time for change amongst the Jedi Order if he were to soon become both a Jedi and a father. So, days later, Obi-Wan would stand before the circle of Jedi Masters inside of the Council, but for the first time in Council, he truly felt as if he belonged. And today, he was taking on the role Qui-Gon once held, as he began to question the Council. He spoke with true purpose, as his words carried the weight of something deeper than his loyalty to the Jedi. Windu asked what was truly on Obi-Wan's mind, so Obi-Wan eventually would tell the Council that he was going to be a father. It was like a huge weight off his chest, as he said that Satine Kryze, Duchess of Mandalore, was his secret wife for nearly a decade, and was carrying his child. The air of the council shifted with gasps from a few and stunned silence from everyone else. But Obi-Wan didn't flinch. He told them that this attachment had not led him to darkness, it had led him to clarity. That love had not broken him, it had revealed the brokenness of the order, that in denying emotion, the Jedi blinded themselves to corruption and they buried compassion beneath order, handed their purpose to a Senate rotting from the inside. Still, he wasn't angry, he just saw purpose now. He spoke of how the Republic had become too bloated, too compromised to protect the very people that it claimed to serve, how the Jedi had become political instruments, not guardians of peace. He was seeing this as he was seeing love and emotions in his own life. He pointed to systems suffering without representation, the missions twisted as the Jedi were held back from doing what was right by Senate rules. But his voice softened when he spoke of Satine, how loving her and watching her work had opened up his perspectives, made him more whole. And then he spoke of Anakin, and how Satine helped him to see that the boy had never needed to be trained like a regular Jedi. He needed to be loved, and now, in guiding him as a brother and giving him his mother, they'd created true balance in Anakin. Obi-Wan looked to each Council Jedi, saying Anakin will be the best of them, and it's because of how he was trained. Across the galaxy, in a quiet chamber just outside of the Senate, Satine and Padme Amidala were preparing to address a skeptical subcommittee. There were new proposals on the table, the right for planetary systems to peacefully secede and join a new coalition, the Separatist Alliance, without threat of military retaliation. Satine had come to see, through her closeness to Obi-Wan, that the Republic could no longer meet the needs of the entire galaxy. The Republic was not evil, not yet anyway, but it was sick. As it seemed like war may be brewing, systems had come to Mandalore to try to lead a group of neutral systems. But due to her closeness with the Jedi, Satine had decided instead to try and avoid any war by working with one of her most trusted friends in the Republic Senate. Padme and her worked well together, and in the committee, they were citing worlds left to fend for themselves, whole systems that were falling apart, because they were forgotten about by the Republic. The Republic was too big to help all of these planets. Mon Mothma offered her support, Bail Organa as well, but others pushed back, most notably senators like Halle Bertoni that were tied to banks, corporations, and power. The tension could be felt, but Satine stood firm with Padme by her side. And then Satine told them that Mandalore would be the first to recognize the Separatist Alliance as a sovereign government, a second galactic power, not in opposition to the Republic, just a new system to help balance out the galaxy. On Sereno, Count Dooku would read this proposal with narrowed eyes. He'd thought that he would need to ignite a war to force change, to burn the Republic to the ground, before even considering rebuilding. But now, Satine and Padme had done what he had not believed possible. They'd begun the process to make secession legitimate. There was a future forming where Dooku could lead a legitimate government, be free of the corruption of the Republic, but it did not need to be achieved as a Sith any longer. The corporate leaders he'd begun to put together, such as Gunray, Tambor, Sandhill, they could no longer dictate the terms. Sidious wanted war. Dooku had begun to see there was a way for peace. He began making secret contact with Satine, Organa, even Obi-Wan. He would not be returning to the Jedi, but he was forging a new way forward, a galaxy that would be free from Sith and blind tradition. Dooku had begun to question his role with the Sith lately, and there was still time to turn back. He just had to find a way to get Sidious out of the picture. And back in the temple, Obi-Wan would walk the halls with Anakin by his side. Both of them changed from the young figures who'd begun their journey together on Naboo. Anakin was confident but grounded. He'd sparred without anger, debated without arrogance, and when he saw Padme speaking in the Senate, his feelings would shift into something else: love. And when Obi-Wan and Anakin began missions to attend negotiations with Satine, Padme, and other senators to gauge the true threat and nature of the Separatists, Anakin would be distracted by Padme's presence. And in this galaxy, there was no Palpatine in Anakin's world, no whispers in his ear, no manipulations. The Chancellor never had a chance to grow close to the boy because there was no void to fill. Anakin already had a mother, he already had Obi-Wan, he already had a future as the Order was beginning to embrace him. Obi-Wan and Shmi had become the stability that Anakin needed, and their relationships with Anakin made him whole. At sunset, Obi-Wan stood on a temple balcony, watching the clouds shift over Coruscant's towers. The Jedi Order was changing with the galaxy, and in the currents of the Force, things were also changing. As back on Sereno, Count Dooku stood tall as he prepared for a different kind of meeting. Across the long chamber of his halls, Darth Sidious arrived to meet him, his voice already dripping with venom as he spoke of their plans, of the war to come, of how fear will break the Republic and the Jedi. He spoke of clone and droid armies, how Dooku will play the part of the charismatic revolutionary, while he orchestrates galactic collapse from the Senate floor. Dooku did not answer. His eyes held only contempt, and without warning, Dooku ignited his blade. Sidious would see that his apprentice needs one more lesson, as the duel would erupt in a flash of red against red, both blades clashing in a storm together. Dooku fought with elegant, calculated strikes, honed over a lifetime of mastery, but Sidious moved with unnatural speed, striking like lightning again and again, as Dooku struggled to keep up at his older age. The castle would see its grand windows shatter, as statues were thrown across the room, and ancient stone cracked beneath the force of their battle. Dooku held his own longer than most could have hoped, and he fought not as a Sith or as a Jedi, just as himself. And Sidious was the culmination of 1,000 years of shadows, while the Sith waited. But Dooku had found his balance, and he knew this was his duty to the galaxy now. But with a twisting strike and a surge of lightning, Sidious would begin to strike down Dooku, driving his blade deep into the Count's side as the lightning scorched across his face. The dark side filled the Force, demanding Sidious to finish this, but Dooku was still alive. Sidious stabbed forward, and Dooku moved just enough to grab Sidious's wrist. He cracked his wrist, then grabbed the red saber, and Dooku drew it across Sidious's throat in a single motion. Sidious's weakness was always his overconfidence, and the Dark Lord would fall without a sound, collapsing in 2 pieces to the floor. Dooku was gasping, but he was alive, victorious. The Sith were gone, and hours later, Dooku's transmission to the Jedi Council would arrive with a terrible message. He was pale and wounded, but alive, as he appeared before the Council confessing the truth. Dooku would tell them that Darth Sidious was Chancellor Palpatine, and he'd engineered a war, that a clone army had been ordered years ago under deceit, that the Republic was being slowly devoured from within by the very man they'd trusted with power. The Council was silent. Yoda's face was deep in sorrow. Windu clenched his fists, silence heavier than rage. The illusion had shattered. The Republic was being led by lies, and the Senate was thrown into chaos as the Jedi went public with Dooku's testimony and the evidence pulled from Sidious's files. Protests would erupt across the core. Systems in the Mid-Rim called for emergency councils. Bail Organa and Mon Mothma issued statements of dismay, calling for immediate investigations into those close to Palpatine. Padme and Satine stepped forward with clarity, and then Padme told the galaxy that this moment was proof that the Republic had grown too vast, too insulated, too entangled with greed and fear to function as one system. It was time to let go. Dooku would work with Satine, Padme, and the emerging CIS delegation to formalize the split. It was called the Confederacy of Independent Systems, as Dooku personally dismantled the influence of the Trade Federation and Techno Union, exposing their dealings with Sidious. Without war, their leverage evaporated. Planets began to join freely: Umbara, Raxus, Dantooine, outer core systems seeking reform. It wasn't always clean, but it would be peaceful. The Jedi Order would begin to reform as well. Obi-Wan, now a father and a master, helped lead the Order into a new era, where Jedi lived in the galaxy, not above it, where love was not forbidden, but guided with care. And years later, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Duchess Satine stood at the steps of the Capitol's palace on Mandalore, hands clasped before a sea of citizens, Jedi, senators, delegates from both galactic governments. Today was the celebration of the 5th year of the creation of the CIS throughout the galaxy, and their child, Jin, was hanging around with Anakin Skywalker, as he typically did when Anakin came by to visit. Anakin was now Jedi Master Anakin Skywalker. Padme Amidala stood close beside Anakin, laughing as he pretended to fight with Jin with lightsabers. The Jedi Order itself had transformed into into something new, Guardians living among the people. Grandmaster Yoda had stepped down, Plo Koon had taken up the role now, Yoda was now a quiet advisor, and Obi-Wan and other forward-thinking Jedi helped lead the next generation of Jedi like Ahsoka, Ezra, Cal, all raised in a temple no longer clouded by fear. Across the galaxy, the CIS thrived in peace. Under Dooku's calm leadership, he was forever grateful that he did not choose the path of the Sith in the end. The Republic as well had changed. Bail Organa as Chancellor would work closely with Padme, Mon Mothma, and others to maintain this peace. The galaxy was not defined by war or empires, but by coexistence, with two governments, two philosophies working in tension and harmony, with the Jedi serving not one of them, but all. And as fireworks bloomed in the skies above Mandalore, and laughter echoed throughout the plaza, Obi-Wan and Satine watched the celebration together as everything worked out as they possibly could have hoped. And folks, that's our video for today. Hope you enjoyed this one. I know my guy, my friend, my good pal, PPSW loves to do Satine stories as well. I do too. So yeah, they're fun. It's fun to explore Obi-Wan's different side, and I wanted to just take a path where she and Qui-Gon kind of help to convince Obi-Wan that this is the right path, and it influences Anakin's training greatly, where he's not as Obi-Wan would have trained him in the prequels, where he's just not, or much less rigid and, embraces Anakin being an actual human being. So yeah, that's the path that was fun to go down. Dooku betrays Sidious, and yeah, I like that. Hope you liked it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.